Welcome to One on One with the Grim One. I am your host, the Slayer of Posers, Master of Disaster, the most electrifying man in corpse entertainment, the Necrosexual. And joining me virtually, we have my co-host, DJ Darrel. How the hell are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
Grim. What would you expect, baby? And in this virtual meeting, this is actually a fatal three-way, a triple threat match of doom, because we also have joining us Sean Meyers from Gates of the Morning. Sean, how the hell are you?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Glad to be here.
Looks like we're all surrounded by our axes, our loved ones. So this will be a great meeting. Darrell, it looks like you're in hell, which I would expect no less from you.
That's right.
Totally grim.
We on week 5 of quarantine now?
I've lost count.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It just becomes a drunken blur after a little bit.
Right.
It's like drunken Groundhog Day.
Every day is a heavy metal hangover.
Oh, man.
That was me yesterday. I had a little bit too much gin and, of course, boxed wine. But when you mix gin and boxed wine, it's like a fatal concoction. And I was feeling it in the morning.
I had gin last night, too. I didn't mix it with boxed wine, though. That's for sure.
Yeah. Cold gin keeps us together. Yeah, it's pretty brutal. And certainly I've always been an aficionado for boxed wine, but I'm also health conscious. I got to stay in showgirl shape. But there's nothing that can drive you to drink like being locked in your home with nothing to do. So it's certainly been a lot of heavy metal consumption of not just great music and riffs, but also a lot of boxed wine. And sure enough, this is one on one with the Grim One. So that means that each week we select one album that holds a special place in our dark hearts. So Darrell, baby, tell us what album we'll be talking about today.
We're going to be talking about Celtic Frost Morbid Tales.
Ooh! An album that launched 1,000 albums, many imitators, and what a solid freaking debut album that is. Tell us, Darrell, what was the first time? What was your first impression when we listened to that album?
So I remember hearing Morbid Tales for the first time, probably when I was about, I would say 11 years old, maybe 10 years old, and my uncles, hanging out with my uncles in their bedroom. I think we were, smoking a little whatever beforehand, and they were like, "Put that away."
When you were 10 years old? Oh
yeah. And so they're like, "Yeah, we got Celtic Frost Morbid Tales on tape." So I was like, I heard some of the songs. I was like, "Oh, cool." You know what really struck me when I first listened back to this is that beginning, that intro. When I got that tape when I was a kid, I put it in the tape player, and it just started going. I was like, "Oh shit, the tape player's broken." So I kept on fast forwarding and rewinding it, thinking it was broken, and then I realized that was like the song.
Yeah. Like any great black metal album, it starts off with an extremely low fidelity instrumental introduction to build the atmosphere before all hell breaks loose. And I call that one Inhuman. It's like the Swiss Wilhelm scream.
Yeah.
What about you, Sean? What was your first impression when you heard Morbid Tales for the first time?
You know, when I started getting into black metal, I kind of worked myself backwards. I started with like the second wave, all that obvious stuff. And then just by doing research, just sitting, maybe I was probably like 12 the first time I heard it. But then I finally, and I had known of it because you're supposed to know Celtic Frost. You have to know that in order to, I wanted to follow all the metal rules when I was, that age. So I had heard it, but when I actually bought the CD, the reissue or whatever, that was probably I was probably 13 or 14, and I remember hearing it and saying, "Whoa, this is my thing," the riffs, and that's when I started getting into guitar too. That was mostly a drummer, and that album, along with a couple others, was responsible for me because dun 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 dun, I could do that, so it's like, all right, maybe I could play a little guitar or something.
Yeah, how hard could it be, right?
How hard could it be? Yeah, but still working on it. But yeah, that was. I think I finally bought the CD when I was in 8th grade, and it was that one. It hit me. It actually hit me, and I think I bought a cheap guitar from my friend maybe 6 months later, and that album was a big reason for it.
I imagine Morbid Tales would be an excellent soundtrack to your own puberty in 8th grade.
It's a fitting title, Morbid. Pretty morbid.
This is a morbid talk, so thank you boys for joining me. And Darrel, boy, I can't imagine what it must have been like hearing Celtic Frost for the first time as a 10-year-old.
I know, yeah, especially being exposed, you as a 10-year-old growing up, MTV generation, I was like, Def Leppard's my favorite band. I like Ozzy and Black Sabbath, but and of course, Alice Cooper and all that stuff was still cool. But then just finding something like that's just so we didn't call it extreme metal then, that even though they're kind of labeled like that, but it really truly was an extreme sounding band, and they were so freaking good. Into the Crypts of Raves. That's such a great track. That's a classic. I think that's probably like the first one I heard that really like stuck in, and it had that, Tomba Boyer's vocal enunciations are they're legendary.
Or mispronunciations.
Yeah, they're so guttural.
That song, they have it, as he says, Dethroned Emperor. It sounds like he's saying Dark Throne Apparel, but it's Dethroned Emperor. But the guy's Swiss, so give him a little bit of leeway, baby. Yeah, I agree. That's, sorry to cut you off, but that's a band, that same kind of similar situation for me, that I knew that they were a band that all the bands I listened to. So they had a reputation that preceded them. And they are often clumped in with black metal because they were posing in corpse paint with the axes, and they certainly had the low fidelity, frosty guitar tone and that sort of dissonant, evil atmosphere. They're one of the first bands, along with Venom, to take that to a new level. And then they've also been clumped in with thrash metal and death metal in some cases, and also punk with some of their beats. But I think Celtic Frost, they're really in a league of their own. There's not anything I could compare them to as this is why they're death metal or this is why they're black metal. They really are just Celtic Frost, and I think that's one of the highest compliments you can give a band, as being a little bit unclassifiable. If anything, the bands that they would subsequently influence, I think, had to do with them being clumped into those genres.
I agree. I mean, you can just hear it all over this album. You can hear Slayer, like so much Slayer. The drums, it's like the Lars Ulrich playbook. A lot of that double bass lines that you hear in Morbid Tales. The drums are amazing in that album. I think that was a game changer. I try to think about who was doing something like this before them. You can look at like Venom and maybe Merciful Fate, like kind of going to the extreme, but it's not the same. Like,
yeah, that's what I was wondering. Who the hell were those guys listening to when they wrote this stuff? I mean, and Hellhammer came out a few years before that, and it was similar too. But what were they listening to that got them? I guess a lot of new wave of British heavy metal, maybe, and stuff. But still, you wouldn't say, "Oh, this sounds like Judas Priest" or anything like that. So, I would like to know what they were listening to when they.
Yeah,
I'm definitely sensing a punk influence on the drums, because certainly they had the menacing, slow kind of mosh pit and doom metal parts. But when they got fast, they got super fast.
D beats and things.
Yeah, D beats.
Yeah.
The fuck, titty fuck, that rhythm.
That's good. That's
the only band I can really, the only metal band I can think of that really did that was like Motorhead, and Celtic Frost kind of took that to a faster level, and then maybe they listened to bands like Discharge, like again the punk influence, because they were really at that time, I think the punk bands were playing faster than metal bands were.
Mm. Yeah, and they had an atmosphere too. That's the thing. Like musically was one thing, but then the kind of intangible part of it, that the atmosphere of it, that so many metal bands still take with them. And I mean, there's two albums that one in particular that I really love. That's contemporary. Well, now it came out. The first Goat Whore album actually is one of my favorite black metal albums ever. I think it gets overlooked because the rest of their albums didn't sound like this one. But Eclipse of Ages in the Black, one of my favorite records of all time. And they totally, I mean, it's a total tribute to them in a lot of ways, but they still make it their own sound. But they even take, I think there's a track, Under a Dark Sun, that pays true. It's got like the harmonics in the riff, like it envisions immortality. So it's you still hear it. I heard it in Napalm Death, The Code is Red. They have at the end of the first song, they have a total, I mean, it's a straight up, this is Celtic Frost. We're paying them respect right now. So
yeah. Several Napalm Death albums. I know that I want to say on Smear Campaign or around that time, there's like an instrumental that they pretty much straight up said like, yes, this is like our version of Celtic Frost with like that kind of what is it called? Like the Usurper or the introduction to the Usurper, like that style of swelling war march. I think the song by Napalm Death is called Velt's March. Yeah, but also all of those breakdowns Napalm Death did, in their old albums like Scum. I remember on the Napalm Death live album, Punishment in Capitals, they play Suffer the Children, and during the breakdown part, Barney's like, yeah, Celtic Frost. So they don't. None of the bands that they've influenced, they don't hide it by any means.
They don't hide it, no.
Yeah,
no.
They're super highly revered. And this is also an appropriate album to speak about because just over the last few days, I spoke with Dan Loker, who played in a couple bands you might have heard about, Stormtroopers of Death, Brutal Truth, Nuclear Assault, and the album we spoke about was Dark Throne, Blaze in the Northern Sky. And same thing, I mean, that album has a ton of super heavy nods to Celtic Frost. Everything from the cowbell that they do in Dethroned Emperor, Dark Throne uses that cowbell in Under the Shadow of the Horns to just mid-pace breakdowns that sound like it could easily be off of one of Celtic Frost's first two albums. And that's just one band.
And that at Panzerfaust, maybe even more so, they went full on Celtic Frost for that. And then, they put their own Dark Throne twist to it too, which is that's one of my favorite albums too, Panzerfaust. Probably a lot of my favorite metal albums were directly influenced by Morbid Tales.
Yeah, I feel like if there was a way to pay royalties to riffs, like Celtic Frost would be fucking rich. Just based off Into the Crypts of Rays alone. Just think about all the bands that have used that style of like D-beat drumming and that kind of like mosh pit, heavy breakdown. That's just, I mean, they're from Switzerland, so I feel like they're doing pretty well. But still, Swiss gold aside, I mean, it's just just that one song influenced like entire genres and subgenres of bands. Mm-hmm. What about you, Darrel? Do you have a favorite song off that album?
What's the Return of the King?
Dethroned Emperor.
Oh, Dethroned Emperor, yes.
Dethroned Emperor.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's like an epic song. It's so good. I was
cowbell
into it. I think that's right after Dance Macabre, correct?
Oh, you talking about Nocturnal Fear? That's the closing song.
The Strange. So that was on, and my kids were hanging out. They were like, "Daddy, turn it off. It's too scary."
That is a scary tune.
It is. That brought me back when I was a kid. I was like, "Oh man, this did scare the crap out of me." Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, it's that fine line between like atmospheric and also kind of like cheesy.
They are so good at that. And that's the thing with them. They so. Have you guys seen the the Giger documentary? Is it
Dark Star?
Yeah, Dark Star.
I still need to see that, but you mentioned it.
So Tom Awoyer was his personal assistant for decades, and so that's how they got use of his art for their album covers. He just allowed them to use it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And he's got like such a big part in it too. So yeah, I can't recommend watching that enough. It's cool.
If you imagine it, like, oh, this is just a guy I work for, and it's like,
yeah. He's just like, he adores Giger. It's a really cool movie. You just will look at. So is it Celtic Frost or Celtic Frost? Am I saying it wrong?
That's a good question. I've always wondered that myself. I've heard everybody say it differently. Everybody.
Yeah. Like I think I heard it maybe 3 different ways in here today.
Yeah, I say Celtic.
I say Celtic.
I've heard both.
I've heard both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't even think Tom Warrior knows. I don't know.
I bet you if we went to like a Riverdance concert or something and we asked, they would know. Because it's like
that's true. Yeah.
They have the Celtic Storm. Celtic. I'm going too far. Sorry.
Celtic. Yeah, it's that the old I guess what would you even consider that language? It's not Irish, or
Gaelic.
Yeah, that's like
yes, that's good.
So some things are lost in translation. But yeah, I mean, obviously pronunciation isn't, especially on that album, pronunciation might not have been Tom Warrior's strong point. So I think you're just going with it. Also, at that one song in Morbid Tales, again, there's that one point where he's like, "Are you morbid?" And I just can't help but think of that terrible Morbid Angel song, "I Am Morbid," or
Yeah.
Great album. But yeah, I'll have to definitely check out that documentary for some upcoming Necro and Chill sessions. And Darrel, did you ever listen to Hellhammer?
I did not.
Yeah.
So I think after that I just got stuck in the whole thrash metal craze and got into Megadeth and all that stuff then after that.
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially, I think that stylistically it's the most similar to Morbid Tales because they were, they preceded each other, but definitely a little bit more raw and bombastic. And I think that's why a lot of black metal bands also kind of worship Hellhammer because they had that just super, in your face, stripped down sound. They took their songwriting to the next level on Morbid Tales, and it's a little bit more polished, if you could say that. Yeah.
It's got a nice loose one thing I'll say though about the playing and its looseness is it's almost like, and I'm guilty of this too, when I recorded my album, like I was so gotta have it tight, gotta have it so these guys just kind of play, they just play, and the looseness of it is something you don't always get in metal anymore. And I think some bands are bringing it back, that kind of loose playing, almost like a live kind of feel, but everything's so pop metal has become so polished that going back and listening to Morbid Tales is like refreshing because it's like, oh, these dudes were just playing, and not everything is super tight, and you kind of like that in a way. And it's something we don't really have. I'm just as guilty of it as anybody, having everything like really polished, digital compared to analog, and it's interesting.
Yeah, in the day of we now don't have to rely completely on great playing and getting a good take. Like everything's digital now, so it's not the same world as tape. There's definitely something lost. There's something that it's going to be hard for people to get again.
Without absolutely going, being like a Luddite and going out of your way to record on tape. Or there's some bands, black metal bands, will still go out of their way to do it on 4 tracks or 8 tracks. But you have to go out of your way to do that. But I agree. There's a lot of metal, a lot of modern metal that, to my ears, just sounds too polished. And it's riffs and tightness are definitely important, but you have to temper that with some raw fucking power. And metal in some ways is good when it's rough around the edges.
Listening to this album again today was good for me. I feel like I got some inspiration. And ironically, actually, a couple weeks ago, I posted it on social media too. And I was like, very happy to say the next album is going to have a snippet of Celtic Frost on there. And it's totally by accident too. I was like glad it finally came out organically in my playing. So there's a good 2 to 3 minutes. I'm going to work some cowbell. I don't have the drums for it yet, but I have a cowbell. I could work it in. I can make it.
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
put some pots and pans together. Try to get
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and while we're on that topic, Sean, tell us about your bands. Gates to the Morning. You released
That's right.
an album.
You got it. Yeah.
Return to Earth. What was it, last year? 2 years ago? Seems like an eternity at this point. Last month.
Even a month ago seems like a lifetime. No, that was back. So we released it back in July 2019. But for me, a lot of all those riffs, I had the project really started in 2009. It was going to be more of like a second wave black metal type of record. I was halfway through it, recording it myself, and all the files got corrupted and got deleted. So I had to give it up. I was going into college for jazz, so I was like, I don't have time to be playing black metal all the time now. I got to learn how to play jazz. So it got put on hold, and eventually in like 2016, I started to revive it a little bit. And so that album released back in last July has a lot of old riffs. So for me, it does feel like an eternity. That's why I was so anxious to start writing the next one. So it was good. We had a couple gigs planned, and we were trying to get something worked with, even with through you, and everything just got shut down. But I'm so anxious to move on from that material anyway. It's great. I love it, but some of that stuff's 10 years old. So at least the concepts of it are 10 years old. So we played a lot of great gigs, but now we're just we're in writing mode. We have to be, which is kind of cool. I'm ready for that anyway.
Yeah, you realize how sometimes when you have gigs, you get so caught up in practicing or just getting from point A to point B, and especially if you have a new album you're trying to work on, I can certainly relate. So it's forcing us to just kind of return to our respective layers and crank out some jams.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's right.
What about, so you have Morbid Tales, you have one of the great forefounders, if you want to put the Mount Rushmore black metal or death metal or extreme metal, that album would definitely be there, probably along with like Welcome to Hell by Venom or Merciful Fate. And then you have their later stuff. Have you guys listened to later Celtic Frost?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not as much as I should have. I really should listen to more of it. To Megatherion, I know, and then everything after that gets a little hazy. I know of Cold Lake. I know. I should really dig into this. Especially some of their newer stuff that came out after the 2000s. I should check it out.
Yeah. Likewise, I've heard a couple Triptychon songs, which is Tom G. Warrior's newer project, and it's solid shit for a guy that's probably in his 60s. So yeah, certainly has stayed busy over the years, not just with Celtic Frost. But to give you the Cliff Notes version, if you listen to like Morbid Tales, in one word it would be ooh. If you listen to Into the Pandemonium, in one word it would be oh.
That also has the Mexican radio cover.
Yeah. That I think was the first Celtic Frost album that I bought when I was in junior high or high school, and it's kind of similar to what you said, Sean. They were a band. They had the reputation that preceded them, and I knew that they were pretty much like all of my favorite bands, so I was super stoked to hear it. I was like, this is going to be so heavy. And I put it on, and he was like, I'm on the Mexican radios. What the fuck is this? So then I got to Megatherion. I was like, oh, this is the album.
Yeah.
Oh, man. First I bought Morbid Tales. And then I was at like the Sam Goody or whatever, and I was like, oh, another Celtic Frost album. And it was Cold Lake. I put that on. I was like, what the hell is this? So it's kind of like their glam album. I mean, it's got some classics in there. It's got some Cherry Orchards, isn't it all right? But yeah, it's almost like a completely different band, but the same guys.
Right. What about Vanity Nemesis? You listen to that one, Darrel?
I was listening to that earlier this week. I haven't listened to it in years, and it's a strange sort of like that Cold Lake Celtic Frost and the like black metal or extreme metal Celtic Frost kind of mixed together. It gets extremely better. It's like they've evolved into something else with that album. Sort of.
That sounds interesting. I have to check it out.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good. It's Cold Lake's worth a listen. I don't want to bash it too hard. But.
Tom G. Warrior, he's an artsy dude.
And they're Swedish.
Swiss.
Or Swiss, yeah. I knew it was something like that. But those guys up there, they can do weird stuff like that, and that's cool.
Yeah. And the guy was H.R. Geiger's personal assistant.
Yeah.
So stretched to see them.
You can have big hairspray hair, and it's cool.
Cool. Well, gentlemen, this has been an extremely morbid talk. I want to thank you, Sean, from Gates to the Morning. Check out Gates to the Morning. Return to Earth, baby, as we hopefully return to Earth sometime in the next months.
Yes.
And DJ Darrel, we'll be talking again real soon. I am the Necrosexual.